Hello, everybody. Welcome to this RM webinar. My name's Dan Braddock, and I'm one of the marketing managers here at RM. I'm the person who's dealt with the setup and the promotion of this webinar, and I'll also be the moderator for today. But the true brains behind the content you're going to see today are Mel Parker and Dave Fitzpatrick. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we're really excited to bring you this content today. There's an awful lot of talk about AI at the moment, the benefits, the risks, the potential, etc., etc. So I hope this webinar provides some insight into how some of these features can be used in Google Workspace for education. You won't hear much more from me today, but before we jump into the content, I have to do a small bit of housekeeping. I hope you'll excuse me. So the webinar content today will be roughly 30 minutes in length, and we have an additional 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end of the session. If you do have questions, then please submit them using the Q&A functionality at the top of your user interface. If you're not used to using the Teams user interface, for example, if you're primarily a Google user, which you may well be, there should be a little button at the top of your screen. So please click it, type your question, and we'll cover what we can at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's get into the content. David, are you okay to steal the screen away?
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to start. Good afternoon, my name is Mel Parker. I lead the educational consultancy team here at RM. My career has been a bit of a teaching and RM sandwich. I started life as a secondary mathematics teacher, then worked for RM managing the educational consultancy team during the BSF years, and then I did some work with the assessment division. I returned to the classroom 16 years ago, again as a mathematics teacher, and progressed to being deputy head and was acting head in a secondary school in Wolverhampton, just as we came out of the first COVID lockdown. I've been back at RM now for 2 years, and my role is to support schools and trusts in developing their use of IT. So on the slide, you can see 3 images, and just a little pause for thought, really, in terms of what do you think they all have in common. So the first one, that calculator, the image, second one is about the internet, and the third image is there to represent AI, sorry. There were obviously many technological steps in between these, but they've all had very similar headlines. I was a student in school in 1986 using that very calculator. I remember the conversations about cheating and over-reliance on them. Yes, some students will try and take the easy route, but as a teacher, we work with students to integrate them into our learning and for them to become an aid, not a crutch. On New Year's Day in 1994, there were no websites as we know them today. 30 years later, no one would really predict what we have available on the internet. I was teaching in my first school in 1990, created my own worksheets on a Banda machine. Some of you may know what that is, but some may not. We would never do that now. The internet plays a huge part in what we do as educators. It was said that the internet was going to see students copying and pasting from the likes of Wikipedia into their coursework, and some of them did, but we talked to those students about it, we spotted it, we explained to them that they could gather information, but they needed to have their own opinions and ideas. The conversation with that student was the key. Yes, AI is incredibly powerful, but the conversations remain the same. AI has been headlines from both sides of the fence. It's going to revolutionise schools, and I think it will, but there are things to consider. Choose your AI tools really carefully. If you're inputting data, check where the data is going to be used. There are also very valid safeguarding concerns in terms of deep fakes, unreliable and misleading information. The concept of fake news has been around for a number of years now, and many schools are teaching young people how to spot it. With AI, it is vitally important that young people are able to critically evaluate the media they read, hear and see. It is harder to spot AI-generated materials when submitted as a student's own work, but we are professionals. And in all our teaching, we discuss student ideas, ask them deeper questions, check them for understanding. AI is not a panacea. The output is only as good as the prompt or the question that is entered. It must be checked for accuracy and bias. It's a fantastic tool in your arsenal that can definitely save you time and has the capability to change how we teach. And it's only limited really by our own creativity. I would encourage any teachers to look at the possibilities. I always felt the greatest CPD was when I was able to discuss with colleagues the best way of teaching a topic. We all then learned and improved. Do share ideas and findings with your colleagues. The genie is out of the bottle with AI. There's no going back. There are colleagues on the call from all areas of education, and it's great to see so many of you are able to join us. Consider, if you haven't already, staff awareness training. I still meet teachers who are really not even aware that AI exists. Demystify it for them. Think about what AI can be used for, what is good practice in your environment. David is going to show you some great practical examples of how teachers can use AI, but we also need to support staff with how to deal with a piece of work that they're concerned has been generated using AI. The same skills we would have used before AI was in existence, but sometimes because AI is the unknown and it's thrown into the conversation, we forget we have dealt with these things before. This month, JCQ have brought out a new guidance on the use of AI in assessments. If you haven't seen it yet, it's available on their website, and I would encourage you to look at it. It gives much greater clarity for schools. Acceptable use policies for staff and students are a must when it comes to AI. If you haven't got one yet, try using Gemini or other AI tools to generate a starter for your policy. Get the prompt right, and it will take some of that writing strain away for you. Always check the content and always make it your own. But it's more than the policy document that's needed. There needs to be a conversation with staff and young people about what is acceptable and what isn't. AI is an amazing tool and with the capability to change so much. Always, however, critically evaluate what you hear, see and read. And with that, I'm going to pass over to David.
Thank you, Mel. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's David Fitzpatrick. I'm an educational consultant for RM. I'm a Google certified trainer. I'm an ex-teacher. I used to teach science and maths, and I was head of IT. The first thing I really want to talk about today is if you haven't yet made the decision between Microsoft or Google, or you'd like some more help, please do reach out to us where we can provide that level of support. Schools that are perhaps using both is very difficult to sustain in the medium term. And strategically, just because you use Word, it doesn't necessarily mean Office is the right way for you to go. So I would explore both options before making those decisions. So the first thing I want to think about is what are the ways you could really exploit the potential of AI. And this really is just a few of the things that you could use in terms of your teaching, learning, administration. I'm just going to leave you just for a few seconds just to read through the content of the slide. The actual uses are just limited by your imagination, and what it can do for schools, for you as administrators, for you as senior leaders is astonishing. This slide set that you're seeing now will be shared with you after it, and it's peppered with links to really useful content. So there's so much to cover today, and I didn't want to overwhelm you with details. So anything you see here is just a link to some more information. But just that quote on the right-hand side is really important. And going back to what Mel was saying, it can't replace the expertise, knowledge, or creativity of an educator, but it can be really helpful to enhance and enrich teaching and learning experiences. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to look at a product called Gemini. So Gemini used to be called Bard. So literally, as I was making this presentation last week, Google have changed the names of their main AI tools. So Bard is now Gemini. And when you're asking AI a question, be that Bard or be that Gemini, what is essential is the way that you frame your questions. It's all to do with what you're asking, and the better you ask those questions, the better the response will be. And you should make very human-like questions. Human-like language will get you the best results. And this diagram here really talks about the key things to ask a good question. So when you're asking a question, you start with your role. Are you a teacher, a leader, a student? Who is the audience? What is the age of the students? Is it Key Stage 3? Is it a reading age? You might also want to include what country you come from, because that will change the spelling and tailor the content to UK curriculum. The quantity of output, do you want 6 pages? Do you want 500 words? Is it a 10-minute talk? All of these things in your language will give you much better outputs from the AI. If you're asking for a scheme of work, you could say that you'd like it to be over a 6-week time frame, or over 8 lessons, or over a term. And again, that will help the AI generate the response you need. And finally, where do you want the output to go? Is it for a Google document or a Word document? Is it for a PowerPoint or a Google slide, or is it for a Google form? So Gemini is a large language model which is designed to generate human-like responses to text-based prompts, allowing it to have natural and engaging conversations with users. This next prompt really is just another way of framing what I've said on the other side of the page. What do you want? Who is it for? And why do you want it? As we go through this presentation today, it's important to understand that AI is not perfect. However, what you're seeing today is the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. However, and I just wanted to draw your attention to this, AI can generate extremely plausible but inaccurate responses, which we call hallucinations. So sometimes what it's producing looks really convincing, but it's completely wrong. So as professionals, as teachers, we need to look at the output and make sure that it is accurate and that it is correct. And again, there's a link there to help you with prompts. So we're looking today and we're focusing on the AI within the Google ecosystem. There will be in a few weeks' time a sister webinar looking at Microsoft's equivalent, but today we're looking at Google. And what we're focusing on today is, as I say, Gemini. Then we're going to look at practice sets, which are the use of AI within Google Classroom. And finally, we're going to look at a brand new product called Gemini Workspace, which a few days ago was called Duet. And these are the 3 things we're going to focus on today's presentation. So let's have a look at Gemini. Again, just because of time, there's so little information that I can give you that I'd like to. I put together there some really nice links to some more information for you to follow up on this after the presentation. So we're going to look at Gemini, and this is what Gemini looks like. And you can see here that we have a prompt here, and literally we've gone to gemini.google.com. Now, and I'm going to teach you here how we can start asking some questions. And just because I didn't want you to watch me typing questions, here's some I made earlier. So let's just copy and paste this question in. And let's see what it gets. So the question I'm going to ask it is, I am a science teacher in England. Again, coming back to what I said before. I'm trying to create a Year 7 lesson plan introducing students to forces, make it informative and engaging, write answers with headings, subheadings and bullet points. I then let the AI do its job, and there it is creating for me that lesson in a few seconds. And it may not be perfect, but as a place to start, it is hugely powerful. If you didn't quite like that version, you could click here and you could try a different version. And there's several drafts that Google creates at the same time. If I go down to look at this AI that's generated, if I go to the bottom, I have some options here. I can make it shorter, longer, simpler, more casual, or more professional. So if I make it simpler, it's now going to rewrite that content for me, but it's going to make it simpler and shorter. So again, I can manipulate the way the output comes to me to fit my needs. A gorgeous thing about the way this works now is, having said, yeah, that's exactly what I want, if I click onto the share button, I can literally now export this to docs, because as you would expect with Google, everything is seamlessly integrated together. So if I say there, creating document, and in a few seconds, there is the document created for me. And as I hope you can understand, that is one example of one thing that I asked it, but it could be any one of 1,000 things that I might want to know. I'm going to ask it a second question now. So in this scenario, I'm a secondary school teacher in England. Please create 15. By the way, you don't have to be polite and say please, it doesn't mind. Create 15 multiple choice questions for Year 7 students on forces to be used in a Google form. So here I've said what the output is. Give 5 possible answers per question, make them increasingly difficult. Please add 3 challenging free text questions at the end. So now, give it a few minutes or a few seconds, and it will generate that output for me. Here we go. What is also important to understand when using AI is that this is not a one-off thing. You don't ask it a question and then have to re-ask the question. It knows what you've asked. So now I could simply say, please provide the answers. And now it will go through, it knows what questions it's asked me, and now as it gets against, okay, it did not do that in testing. We're going to move swiftly over that, but it should have provided the answer. If I'd gone back to my initial prompt, here we go, let me do this. If I go back to the initial question I asked, and I just put at the end, please provide answers, and do it again. Hopefully this time it will re-ask the questions, and at the end of the content, it will this time produce the answers for me. And of course, then anyway, we'll move swiftly over that. So they're the sorts of questions that I could ask it. I can also do things like ask it to simplify. So for example, if I went to BBC News and I've got a news article when I was teaching a primary school class, and the language of the news article was too difficult, you can literally copy some content and say, please simplify for a reading age of 10. You then put in the text, and it will then generate new content with a different reading age. So again, can really support differentiation. So that is an example of Gemini, and I hope you can see some of the power and potential of that. The next thing that I want to talk about today is something called practice sets, which are embedded into Google Classroom. This is a relatively new feature within Google Classroom. It is phenomenal, game-changing, I would say. I just want to point out that the practice sets, although there is a free version of Google called Google Workspace for Education Fundamentals, which is completely free and will remain free in perpetuity. To get practice sets, you do need, as a school, as an institution, or as a trust, to upgrade either to the teaching and learning, which is roughly £30 per teacher, but you don't have to have it for all teachers, or you can get Google Workspace for Education Plus, which is about £4 per student, and then teachers are free, and that's per year, by the way, for students. And if you do commit to Google for 2 or 3 years, then you get a 10 or 15% discount. So I've got some details here about different editions of Google Workspace, but really what practice sets, you can think about them, are genuinely providing personalised learning to students, a virtual teaching assistant, and also giving you hugely powerful analytics or insights into the answers of your students. So as a teacher, and we all know that when we have 30 students in a class, if some students are studying, it's very difficult for us to give individual time to individual students, particularly and especially when they're not even in our classroom. So that's what practice sets does. So we're going to have a little look at practice sets now. So here we are into Google Classroom. and I'm going to go to resources, and here is how I create a new practice set. We're not going to cover this today, but incidentally, there is a new feature where you can create a video activity based on YouTube clips. And what's coming very shortly is the ability to the AI to look at the video and ask students questions based on the content of the video, again, without the teachers having to do that themselves. So something like Edpuzzle for those of you who are familiar with that. What's hugely powerful about practice sets is not only is it the fact that it's this virtual teaching assistant and it's this personalised learning experience, it's also that you can use content you already have. And I'm going to just illustrate that to you now. So if I create a new practice set, I could just type in my own questions. We're going to do a maths theme here just because I used to teach a bit of maths, but obviously this works for a whole myriad of subjects. But for those of you who have got a maths background, there is a really powerful maths keyboard here that you can use to do your maths input for you and for students for that matter. But what I wanted to show you here, which I think is just astonishing, is if I click here on the import button, I can literally go and pick up a past exam paper or any PDF that you have. We're just going to choose this PDF here. It now brings that PDF into practice sets, and I literally draw around the questions that I want to use. It's just that simple. So I want that question and that one, and here, all the questions you want from this paper. Let's take this one as well. And then I simply import the questions. And you can see they've come into here. And then I can say, so what is 1476? I can say the answer to that is, to the nearest 10, is 1480. But can you see under skills now, it has said see suggested. So it's looked at this tiny screen clipping of the exam paper. It's looked at the content, and then it is suggesting help resources that the students may need in order to help them. So I am going to use those suggested skills. Again here, the answer to this is 7/10. And again, C suggested has come up here, and it is now convert between fractions and decimals or whatever help I wanted to use. And that is how simple it is to take content, either your own or from PDF. It will use the AI to look at the questions and generate support materials. So if we go and have a look at how that looks for the students, here's one I made earlier. So I'm going to now run that practice set as that student. So here we're going to say this is 1470. I'm going to check my answer. The AI tells me I'm wrong. I can then click here because it's telling me that I've got some help available to me. And here we can say, I'm not going to run that obviously because it will talk over me, but there would be some help and support. I can then say, oh, I know what it should be. I know where I've gone wrong, and I'm going to check. And it now tells me I've got it right. I'm just going to run through these nice and quickly. I'm going to check that one. Check that one. The question in 4, there's loads of different right answers, so they can't give me a right answer. So as a teacher, I would have to look and check that afterwards. But I'm going to choose 100 because I know that is a 3-digit number that's a multiple of 5. Here I'm going to put 40 as 0.4 as a percentage. And here it tells me I'm wrong. Again, I could look at the help and then I could reflect and say, oh yeah, I forgot to add the percent. Now that's correct. And finally here, what's the coordinate of that point? And I'm going to do it's 3,2. And again, I'm going to check that. Again, I've got it. Sorry, that shouldn't be right. Doesn't matter. And now I have finished that work. It should have been in brackets. Don't worry about that. So if I now go back to the teacher and I go to that class, So this is the next really powerful part of practice sets, is not only has it provided teachers with that virtual assistant, if I now go to class insights, it now cuts that data. It tells me where students found it easy and where they found it difficult. It goes through every single question type here and tells me whether they got it right or wrong. And again, here, more data for me. If I go and I just want to look at question 5, because I can see lots of students got it wrong, I can click down here and it tells me how they did for all of those questions. If they had different attempts, so you can see here that the student seminar 7 had 1 attempt. If I click on there, I can see where the attempt was wrong and why it was wrong. So straight away, immediately I can see, it's not they didn't understand, they just forgot to put the percentage. So again, practice sets are a really powerful use of AI. And the last thing we're going to look today is something called Gemini Workspace or Gemini Business. This is all very new, but basically this is now Gemini, which I showed you 15 minutes ago, but built into, integral to Google's productivity apps, which are Docs, Slides and Sheets. I'm going to show you that now. So this is now another Google document, but you can see now that the ability to help me write is built directly into this Google Doc. So for example, I can put some text down here and I'm going to put that into my document. And one of the things that this does is I can proofread. So this is working very much like Grammarly, and it will now look and correct all my spelling, all my tenses, everything within that. So again, hugely powerful AI being used to correct both spelling and grammar and punctuation, as you would expect. But I can also use it to do things like this. So again, this would have worked in Gemini without this, but this is just, as I said, it being embedded directly into the tool. So this is the question I'm asking it now. I'm a deputy head in England. Create an 8-page slideshow for Year 11 assembly on managing exam stress. Include coping mechanisms like routines, taking breaks, rewards, create revision timetables. So just some things, some content that I'd like it to include. Add websites that can help students to cope with exam stress on the final slide. So again, with one click, rather than me starting from scratch and about the best laid plans, this absolutely answered this question this week, deciding not to do it today. Excellent, but you get the idea. I'm going to move swiftly over that because I'm not quite sure why. As I said, there is the move to Gemini is very, very new this week, so it might be that there's just a little bit of teething issues. And I could also, if I, for example, in Gmail, it works exactly the same. So I could I just I could put in a very brief prompt and then I can elaborate again, just like you saw me doing before, and then it will give me much more perfect responses and much more grammatically correct, spelt correct responses to what I'm doing. And the last thing that I wanted to say is something a little bit more challenging, which again, I'm hoping it's not going to let me down with today. The question I said was, the question I asked, let me just show you there, was, I'm an English head teacher and I want to email a parent called Mrs. Bora, thanking them for meeting me, expressing my concerns about their ability to deliver the right curriculum, etc. And then you can see here that it has taken those very brief prompts and made a very nice email that I can just tinker with and send, or if I wanted to, again, I could refine that to make it shorter, longer, more formal, less formal. So if I just go back to my thing, So in summary, we've talked about Gemini, then we looked at practice sets, and then we talked about Gemini Workspace, which is Gemini built into your core apps. We talked a little bit about the ways that the AI can support you in your administration, in your lesson planning, and then a couple of things at the bottom just to remind you the context for the question is really important, and look out for hallucinations. Verify the outputs. And on that note, I'm going to hand back to Dan.
Brilliant, David. Thanks so much for that. I think we may have seen some examples of how quickly this technology is developing in there with some of the changes. Nothing like being made to think on your feet there, is there? We've got a few questions coming in from people. The first one, you spoke about using these tools to generate things like lesson plans and resources for lessons. What are the risks associated to doing this, and how can we mitigate them?
Mela, you can take that. Am I going to take that?
If you do you want to start, David?
So, as I said before, Dan, it's really important that you verify the response. It's very important that you understand that the output may be wrong. We talked about the hallucinations. So as professionals, we need to look at the output and we need to check that it's correct. On a wider thing now, we, as a teaching profession, this is really important for everybody on the call. We need to start rethinking how we are going to test understanding. We can no longer count on testing understanding by the output from a student because we don't know if it's theirs anymore. It'll be too good to know whether it's theirs or AI's. And it used to be literally weeks ago that you could put the content of AI into AI checkers and it would tell you whether or not it was AI generated, but already the AI is getting too clever for them. So we need to be checking as teachers and we need to be thinking, is the material we're getting back from students, is it real or is it AI generated? Because even if we're slow here, I guarantee you, particularly in secondary schools, your students will be all over this.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question is, will there be a link to this recording so we can share with colleagues? Yes, is the answer to that. So in the coming days, we're going to endeavour to make sure that you've got a copy of the recording to anybody that registered with their email address, and that'll be sent to your inbox. The next question we have is, please could you just go over how to get Gemini in Google Docs?
So to get Gemini in Google Docs, what you need to do, you need your administrator to switch that on because you have to be over 18 for a start, and then you have to pay. So it is a paid monthly license subscription and it is quite expensive. This is within Docs, within the productivity apps. It's going to be, I think, the education pricing, as far as I know, hasn't been confirmed yet, but my understanding is for business, it's between £20 and £30 per user per month. But the Gemini interface that I showed you at the start, where you're asking it a question not within Docs, that is going to be free. The basic version of that is going to be free. And you saw there was the ability to then bring that into your Google Documents. So you don't necessarily have to pay. And sorry, Dan, also what's coming is with Gemini, the ability to actually interrogate your Google Documents. So you could say, for example, look through my Google Documents and tell me the last document I wrote about whatever, and it will come back and search your drive and tell you that with the link back to the document. So this is fully integrating into your Google Docs as well.
Great, thanks, David. The next question is, how do you start using Gemini in the Workspace apps? Do you have to log into something to get started?
Absolutely not. No, again, once your administrator activates Gemini and once you have paid for licenses and allocated those to particular members of staff, then it will literally just work. The next time you open up Google Docs or the next time you open up Gmail. By the way, this is also working, which I didn't have time to show you today, in Google Slides and in Google Sheets. The technology is just developing at such a pace, but what will be happening, I can confidently say in the next few months, is you will literally be able to point it at a spreadsheet, a Google sheet, and say, analyze this for me, tell me this, tell me that, and it will just generate the answers for you. Not there today, will be there within the next few months.
Thank you. They're coming in fast now. Is there a recommendation for schools trusts to have a policy related to AI?
So yes, I would absolutely think that is so important. There are policies on the internet, you can find them. I would actually think about your trust and what you want to do, what your policies are in school around IT, and add to those. Use Gemini to create the starter of your policy. Think about the questions that you're going to be asking it. Are you talking about primary school students? Are you talking about secondary? Are you talking about the use in terms of the JCQ regulations? So there's a whole wealth of things to be thinking about. But yes, absolutely. And we can put the links to the JCQ, etc., with the slides that you'll receive.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mel. A question from Katerina, music to my ears. Will there be any more webinars like this? And swiftly followed by, are there similar facilities in Microsoft, e.g. Microsoft Teams, Mel?
So David and I often have the conversation about the comparisons between Microsoft and Google. We are running a Microsoft one towards the end of this month before the Easter break. So there is the equivalent one we'll be running then, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So I think that's about all we have time for today. Just like to take this opportunity to thank you both. Incredible content there. If you can see the slide that's currently on your screen, you have my contact details on there. If you'd like to reach out to give feedback, submit ideas for further webinars, inquire about working directly with Dave or Mel, or just to say hello, it would be great to hear from you. So thank you, everybody, for attending today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.